Thank you, everybody. Good afternoon and welcome to the Managing Stratas During a Public Health Emergency webinar. My name is Alex Longson and I'm one of the 3 professional standards advisors here at the Real Estate Council. I would like to welcome my co-presenters, Andrew Seaton, President of SPA VC and owner of a large brokerage in Vancouver, and Tony Gioventu, the Executive Director for the Condominium Homeowners Association. I'd like to thank you both for taking the time out of your busy schedule in this hectic situation to join us in today's webinar, and thank you everybody else for logging in. We recognise that this is a very stressful time for everybody, and we are doing our best to support you, your licensees and your clients by providing guidance and information through our COVID-19 website. I encourage you to visit the website regularly as we're providing frequent updates to the checklists for both professionals and frequently asked questions for consumers, amongst other resources. If you're not sure exactly where to find it on our website, just go to our main site, recbc.ca, just scroll down a little bit, and on the right-hand side, you'll see a big banner, and just click into that, and that takes you into the COVID-19 website. As we're all adapting to rather extraordinary circumstances during this pandemic and the practicality of physical distancing, I'll ask for your understanding if anything goes awry with today's webinar. Well, that was the first thing. We will be recording it so you can share it with your peers and those that couldn't attend. The offices of the Real Estate Council are currently closed. However, our staff are all working from home and we continue to be available to support you by phone and email. So all of your licensing questions, education questions, just do exactly the same as you've previously done. We have information on our websites for licensing and education. And again, just go to the logo at the top of the screen and then click into the fact that you're a professional and look under licensing or education. And there's prompts there to answer any of your questions and provide your email addresses for ways to contact those departments. In this webinar, our goal is to connect you with your peers and share best practices and hear from you about what's been working as we negotiate and navigate through these tumultuous times. Our moderators will now explain how you can participate. Okay, so before I open it up to hear from you and take your questions, I wanted to share some of what we've been hearing in the past couple of weeks as you and your clients have negotiated and navigated around COVID-19. Whilst this isn't specifically relevant to strata management, we have had a number of questions in regards to tenanted property, and I'll just segue now to tell you that the Residential Tenancy Board has just recently provided clarity on this, and you may have seen an email from us this morning with some links to the Residential Tenancy branch. They've got some frequently asked questions. So we do encourage you, if you also do rental property management, go take a look at their website. I think they've answered all of the questions. They've hit on all of the points, all the questions that we certainly had. I'll also mention to you now that we, as you know, we have got a new website. And instead of the professional standards manual and the brokerage standards manual, it's all been amalgamated into the knowledge base. And the knowledge base also included what was previously the knowledge base on the old website. So it's all in one place. And as new guidelines get released, some parts of the old professional standards manual or brokerage standards manual will be taken offline, and new guidance documents will replace those. I know that some of you have had concerns with the knowledge base and that it can be difficult to find the information you're looking for. I want to assure you that we're actively working on refining and improving this important part of our website. And I also want to reiterate that we're still in a period of transition and the PSN is being revised. So it's going to take a little while, unfortunately. This all happened at exactly the same time as this pandemic. So please work with us. If you do have any questions, you can't find something, absolutely reach out to one of the professional standards advisors and we'll try and find it for you. One of the things that we've been hearing, and certainly Tony and Choa have provided a significant amount of information on this, is holding Strata AGMs and SGMs. While real estate services have been included amongst the province's essential services, you must follow the orders and guidance provided by the provincial health officer to ensure safe operations. I want to remind everybody to look for alternatives to holding in-person Strata AGMs. And maybe this is a point in time where I'll ask Tony if he can expand on this for us.
Sure, thanks Alex, and thanks to the Council for hosting the session for everybody. I'm just going to pop up right now a link that is the format we've been using for restricted proxy meetings. What you should be able to see is you'll see a sample of the notice of the agenda, and then a sample of the restricted proxy form, a sample of minutes that were done. All of these, by the way, are on the CHOA website. You can go in, download them. They're on Word documents and Excel documents if it's a related project. And you'll see on the proxy form, for example, that all the fields in red are the things that would have to be changed or altered or corrected to be specific for your client. When we looked at this initially, when meetings started to be canceled, we had to look for an alternative. And Section 56 of the Strata Property Act actually allows a person to limit their proxy. So unless the proxy has otherwise been limited. So this is how we create a restricted proxy. And this is not new. We've been doing this for some large strata corporations at Whistler for the past 15 years because most people are in worldwide situations, and electronic communications or meetings were just impossible because technology frequently got disrupted. So the restricted proxy is similar to having almost an absentee vote, except that it does have to appoint a person to physically represent that proxy at the time the meeting is held. So in this case, what happens is the restricted proxy itemizes, you'll see that down on the proxy form itself here, it itemizes the decisions that are the major decisions that have to be made by the owners. And so in this case, in this sample, it's to ratify new rules which are relating to storage units, to approve a budget for the next year, to permit electronic voting at general meetings as a bylaw amendment. All of these, of course, are contained within the notice package. What happens is the person selects their vote, they assign or identify who the proxy assignment is going to be. That has to be one of the people physically convening or attending the meeting, because remember, we have to be represented in person or by proxy. So it could be a council president, it could be a council member, it could be an owner in the strata, or the lawyer for the strata corporation, or somebody from our office even if you want, who will actually convene the meeting. They receive all of the proxies, they calculate all the proxy votes and the results of those votes, and that forms the minutes. The proxy, if you look closely, that it says here that items A to F under the third bullet, which are procedural, and N, which is terminate the meeting. These are procedural items such as approve the agenda, elect a chairperson, terminate the meeting. These items are automatically, the proxy holder is authorized to ratify each of those items, because that is specific information that may not be known until the absolute last moment of the meeting itself. So the meeting is convened. Everyone is basically represented by proxy. The votes are counted, the votes are reported. The important thing on the form to understand is that the vote itself has to be very clear that it's restricted. Also, in your notice package, it's very helpful to include instructions. They get your conventional notice package, doesn't change at all, except for the proxy and except for this notice page that identifies how the meeting is taking place. Everything else is exactly the same. They're invited if you do schedule a conference call, and I'll explain a meeting that we did on Saturday in the Mission area that was a huge success on this format. What they did is they did a restricted proxy. They'd already issued their notice, but by the time the cancellations came along, it was too late. So they issued a restricted proxy the week before, and they set up a simultaneous Zoom meeting to coincide with the time the meeting was held, which allowed owners to basically monitor the situation or to even ask questions during the meeting itself if something arose. It went incredibly well. They had an 85% participation rate of owners by restricted proxy. Virtually every resolution passed unanimously. They've kept the meeting very simple. Their meeting was a very basic meeting of approve the budget, approve the bylaws, and they had to approve one small contingency expense. That's all they did at this meeting. Those things were very easy to get through very quickly. They accommodated an increase for a budget. Now, so here's two of the issues that may occur with a restricted proxy. The first is you need to make it perfectly clear that there will be no secret ballots. So the restricted proxy is already identified. Those instructions will be undertaken. The Strata Corporation, in this circumstance, the property manager was online for the meeting, and the property manager took the minutes, had already received the proxies originally to transfer them over to the president of council. The property manager had already pre-calculated all the votes based on the proxies, so the council didn't even have to do that. They already knew what the outcomes were. And so it isn't going to be possible to have a secret ballot under this method. The other difficulty is that there may not be amendments permitted. So if you put in a restricted proxy and you don't know yet what your insurance is going to be, you might want to put a condition on the proxy that for the purpose of approving the budget, if the insurance increases greater than what was proposed, the proxy holder is entitled to amend the budget. You might want to consider that. The difficulty with that is any type of leverage that is given to the proxy holder is probably going to make the owners less reluctant to participate. So what we're trying to encourage here is the best possible level of participation from the owners. The meeting basically took 45 minutes, including a whole bunch of questions, and just adding and multiplying and verifying that the minutes were correct. But with an 85% participation rate and almost every resolution passing unanimously, it was really a clear success. And this is with notice having already been sent out. Some people didn't change to the new restricted proxy. They just left their proxies at the discretion of the proxy holder, which was fine, which was the president of council in this case. Whoever the designated proxy holder is, however, they need to participate in the meeting. The difficulty with sending out a general proxy is those proxies may go to multiple people and those voting rights may somehow be compromised. We're having some of the similar problems with online voting if electronic meetings are permitted, is verifying the accuracy of the votes and having to rely on technology, not bouncing people out at critical times for voting. So those are some of the basics. What you want to do, at the very least, is provide instructions to your owners. Read the notice package. If you're setting up an information meeting as a call or a Zoom meeting at the time, the details of how they can participate in that, how to complete their proxy and instructions, and then what they can do. In the case of the Strata Corporation in Mission on Saturday, they allowed up to an hour before the meeting owners to drop their proxy in a secure drop box in their lobby if they wanted to. And so most of them emailed, though. They took photos, they scanned them, they emailed them to the president of council and to the property manager, so they were all covered. So, it's unusually in a surprise in this situation, what our result has ended up being is a higher rate of participation and a shorter meeting, which everybody left with quite a bit of relief on. So it's possible to do this if you've already sent out notice. It's possible to do this if you're just preparing for your notice. It's even easier because you can then prepare the documents in advance.
Tony and Alex, a couple of questions came in through the Q&A. Would you like to take this now?
If they relate to this topic, for sure, yes.
Absolutely. So Lisa Letnick asked, is there a time limit for general meeting outcomes to be challenged for a proxy meeting?
I don't think that there would be any time limit, but I think if what she's implying is, could somebody dispute this and go to the tribunal? They could, but what will happen from a tribunal perspective is, will the Strata Corporation be able to provide evidence that everyone's voting rights were respected, that they gave proper notice, that they convened a meeting, that there was an eligible proxy holder who could vote for all of those votes and execute them in accordance with the act. I think that if you can meet those steps, that's what you really want to look at. One of the challenges with not being able to permit a secret ballot on some of these items is that's often a bylaw provision in many bylaws. It's just simply not going to be possible to do this under the circumstances. Even if you did electronic voting under the current systems that are available, the only way you can actually verify a vote as credible or not is by calling the roll when you have a conference call. So you wouldn't be able to permit secret ballots. And if you had any commercial property associated with the residential property, or if it was an all commercial strata corporation, it's not possible to do a secret ballot because of the proportional voting. So the secret balloting may get raised as an issue. What's going to get looked at, of course, is, was there participation? Was there reasonable effort? Did you comply with the notice? Did you comply with the meeting? And was there any harm done to the Strata Corporation as a result of this? It's not perfect. No one is saying this is a perfect solution. There are certainly limitations. There are certainly some complications. If you have an issue that might be controversial, for example, or may require dialogue and debate with all of the owners, and so one of those has come up. That issue is an owner who is wanting to make a significant change to the exterior of their unit, and that's going to change the appearance of the property. The Strata Corporation, given the current circumstances, has suggested that that matter wait until that a meeting can be properly convened and the owners can congregate. And that may be the appropriate solution. If it's anywhere that it looks like the Strata may be in a situation where they've committed an unfair act, I think they want to be cautious about how they proceed. And certainly they're going to want to talk to legal counsel if it looks like that's a problem.
Thanks, Tony. Robert Sokovic here said, can a blanket provision be given that allows amendments on the proxy?
Yes, yes. So whatever the proxy wording and instructions are, that's what the proxy grants. The only downside of giving a blanket provision on amendments is that one person may be representing, if you have 150 unit strata, one person might be representing 130 proxies with a blanket provision on any amendments. If that happens, or if that's the result, the unfortunate side of that is you may have quite a reluctance of owners who want to provide a proxy. So I would think you need to think seriously about that, because if you do that, then what you could potentially be doing is acting unfairly against an owner or a group of owners. So you want to be careful that you don't do that.
Thank you. And Danny Linkert asked, can you please explain the election of the Strata Council when doing a restricted proxy meeting? How would that show on the proxy itself?
So there would be two ways of doing it, which would be the same way we do it at a normal general meeting. First off, before you send out your notice, try and canvass all of your owners and see who's available to be on council. Not surprisingly, we suddenly have a whole bunch of people who are simply resigning and not coming back on council. So strata corporations are finding that they're a little short of council members right now. Do an advanced poll of all of your owners, and if you can come up with a nomination list, or a nomination list at least 7 days or 5 days prior to a meeting, that the owners can actually fill in their proxies, and they can do one of two things. And you can do this on the proxy form. If you look at the bottom, this one here is that the council, there were only, and this happened in Mission too, there were only 5 people that were nominated and elected to council, and they simply did it in one single vote. The 5 names were included and distributed to everyone, and it was one single vote that executed those 5. But if you had an election, and let's say you had 12 nominations for 7 positions, you could put the 12 names down, and the owners could elect by majority vote, minimum 3, maximum of 7, or whatever your bylaws say. It's just going to require more counting and more calculation if you do it that way. But both methods are possible using a restricted proxy.
I apologize. We're kind of getting a lot of questions on this, and we were going to reserve this for the after. I have like 4 more questions that popped up because of this, and someone wants to speak. Are we okay with this? Does that work for everyone?
I'm okay. I mean, you know, once we, as long as we've got time for some other questions afterwards.
Sounds great.
That sounds fine.
For sure, it's probably the biggest issue right now.
Okay, so Sandra, go ahead.
Paul has a question. Paul, you've been unmuted. You can go ahead now. You may be muted on your side.
I think it's the bottom left-hand corner of, oh, there you go.
I actually don't have a question. I accidentally clicked that, sorry.
Oh, no problem.
Okay.
It happens. Tanya Millage asked, what is the suggestion on new buildings that have now reached 50% equals 1 and needs to have an AGM? Would restricted proxy vote be appropriate?
Well, I can, you know, anybody else can jump in on this. The Strata Corporation is going to have an obligation to convene that meeting. The developer has an obligation to convene the meeting, and if they don't convene the meeting, there are potential penalties. So they do have an obligation to do this. You could, I suspect that the bylaws were not amended to include electronic attendance at meetings. If they were, you could convene the meeting that way. Essentially, they need to elect a council and approve a budget for the next fiscal year. And also being a new building, it's unlikely that they have any substantial amounts of reserves. So they are going to be pretty tight on cash flow. So it would be in their interest to want to make sure that they get their new budget and a council elected and approved. You could do it by restricted proxy. The person who chairs this meeting as the first AGM of the Strata Corporation is the developer. So, you know, that's the one caveat here is, you know, maybe the developer chairs the meeting, but the proxies are all held by an owner or another party. But if they're a restricted proxy, then the instruction is you must vote the way I have instructed, and you can't alter that. And it actually gives everyone a better level of input because you're probably going to result in a better level of attendance at your first meeting. But yeah, no, these are some of the complications that we're having right now around first meetings. The other problem with first meetings is what happens when the first interim budget suddenly is so desperately wrong because the insurance was much more expensive than we'd anticipated. And Andrew's going to talk about that when we get to that issue, because that's a bigger issue as well.
Okay, thanks, Tony. Greg mentioned here more of a comment that modern web conference software does allow voting, including anonymous votes. Roll call is not necessary. If you're using modern professional web conference software, they happen to use 3CX, for instance, to support that.
Yeah, and certainly if you can verify that there are no irregularities in the voting system that you're using, and that you have an audit printout of the participants and a record of who they were, because you also have to go through the registration process as well. So this would provide you with a record of who the participants were. We've actually gone through several electronic meetings. The problem with them is there are voting irregularities, and it is not as easy as everyone says, well, we'll just use an online system with secured voting. It's not as easy as everyone thinks it is when you actually start applying a measure or a test of credibility. Who actually voted, who actually registered, what was their vote. You know, if you can, from this, if you can publish off from a secured identity for each person, if you can publish off an audit of all of the votes and how they were calculated, that may be the best solution for you. The difficulty with most electronic votes or bylaws that permit attendance by electronically, the bylaws themselves didn't go far enough. They don't talk about how votes would be handled. They don't talk about how secret ballots would be handled. Electronic voting is not balloting. There are two different functions. It's two different languages. So, you know, you need to look closely at the bylaws bylaws also and determine, have we actually met the test, that we can defend that what actually occurred has some evidence to it. That's the biggest challenge, of course, is if someone does file a CRT complaint, do you have any audit documents or defensible evidence that can help support the process? But certainly, I think that it indicates that we need a reliable online voting system if we're going to look at these types of issues in the future as well.
Thanks. We've got 2 more comments, and then I think we can move on because we're halfway through our period right now. Jeff Halverson says, would the proxy forms, if retained for 2 years, then be a record referred to under S35 and S36? If so, can an owner request copies of the retained proxy forms under S35 and S36 following the meeting? If so, should that be noted on the proxy?
You could note it on the proxy. I thought somebody would ask this question. Thanks, Jeff. It's a really good question, though. The moment those proxies are sent to the Strata Corporation, they're going to be correspondence. And so they have not been issued to a different person independent of it. They've been sent to the corporation and to the representative, and I think they could be deemed as correspondence. So the other thing is that there aren't going to be secret ballots using this type of system. So yes, there is a bit of a challenge with respect to how people are voting, and would that be disclosed? It could be something that to make that perfectly clear, ideally put it on the proxy form that we will retain copies of these, that they may be accessible, or they could simply be retained that we will retain copies, and copies will be made available, for example, to the Civil Resolution Tribunal in the event of a dispute or a claim. You know, like, I think that what you need to do is think about what the intent is and make sure that's published. And if it looks like it's going to be an issue for your Strata Corporation, maybe get some legal advice also.
Thanks, Tony. One last comment, and then we will absolutely move on. Thanks, Jason, for that. We had a reply. I presume the stale dates for a proxy would still apply. And if many managers are holding Zoom meetings and feeling their way through the technology features and executing the voting process, do you see any major pitfalls? But I think you've addressed some of those already.
Yeah, the only pitfall that I see that is a real problem is that the biggest pitfall is if you're holding a Zoom meeting, you can't use Zoom to vote unless you have a bylaw that permits electronic attendance at a meeting. So you can't just jump to a Zoom meeting and allow people to vote by Zoom. You have registration issues, you have verification of voting issues, you have and you don't have a bylaw that permits that. So this is, if you do have a bylaw that actually gets you there, that allows you to have an electronic meeting and deals with the voting issues, that's wonderful. And it may make your life quite a lot easier. In exchange for that, though, as a short gap for the next couple months, a restricted proxy is something that makes it easier for owners to participate, and gets you through the essential business that your Strata Corporation has to get through.
I think at this point we'll move on. Thank you so much, Tony.
Great.
And
are you still sharing your screen, Tony? Can you unshare it?
Let me get rid of that. Thank you.
Excellent.
There we go.
Excellent. Okay, so before we move on, and we are going to move on, just wanted to ask Andrew, do you have anything else to add to that?
No.
Or anything that Tony said?
Pretty good. That's one of the big questions we're getting, is how to run these types of meetings. So I think that.
Okay. Did you have any specific topics that come to mind that you're hearing?
Yeah, I do. Just quickly, first, I'll just say for those of you that are listening that are not aware of what SPA BC is, we're comprised of management companies that provide strata management services in BC. We basically act as the voice of the industry in BC. We definitely have the ear of government all the time, but especially now. So we've been contacted by the government on a pretty regular basis, i.e. daily at the moment, asking us for input on different things that they're working on, from Ministry of Housing, Ministry of Finance. And so we've been providing them with a lot of information, and we get that information by having a membership that asks us questions and lets us know what's important to them. So by all means, if you're out there and you have some concerns or some questions and you'd like it to be communicated to government, one way to do that is to send that information to us, and then we can compile it and make sure that it's passed on and give you feedback from what we receive. So if you just go to spabc.org, you'll find our contact information there. I guess a lot of the questions we're getting right now are really, we're getting a lot of things from management company owners and managing brokers asking questions about how we're actually operating at the moment and how we're dealing with different things. I think one of the things that's really come out is there's a lot of concern about, you're a little less efficient when you're operating from home, either completely or partially. So it's leading to concern from our members about potentially missing deadlines, whether it's a deadline that's RISA imposed or a a Strata Property Act issue, or perhaps a directive from a client. There is some good resources to look at, and Alex, I think, already mentioned the Real Estate Council website, but there's an excellent document on there, which is it's directed specifically at managers. It's called Information for Strata Managers, and if you click on there, it talks about some things, and one of the things it talks about is dealing with directives, and if you're having an issue, and it's basically, it summarizes the document what's happening, and if you're receiving different directives from people and having issues around either following up timely or potentially whether you should be doing those directives or not, because there may be some kind of conflict with the health authority and those types of things. You should definitely be documenting those things. So we're getting a lot of questions about that. So I think
let me just jump in there, Andrew, as well. Just so if anyone's listening and they do have questions, should I be doing this? Shouldn't I be doing this? Feel free to call one of the advisors. We'll try and help you negotiate through the legislation and explain to you the type of lens that the Real Estate Council is going to put on this in the event that there happens to be any complaints in the future. Sorry, thank you.
Oh, thanks, Alex. One of the things that we're working on right now, along with a bunch of other parties in the Ministry of Housing, is that the Ministry of Housing is about to put up a Strata Housing COVID-19 page on their website. It's supposed to be up by this Friday or potentially Monday, and it's going to contain some useful information that I think managing brokers and Strata management company owners and senior management will find helpful. Few of the things that it's going to address is payment of Strata fees. A lot of people are getting requests from their Strata Council clients or from individual owners about, do I have to pay my Strata fees? Is there some kind of deferment and those types of things? The Ministry of Housing site is, I think, going to make it pretty clear that paying your Strata fees is a requirement. There are no provisions, at least at this point, for people to delay the payment or not pay them. There's been some other initiatives taken on by the government to help free up money from people so that they can pay their Strata fees amongst those other types of necessary bills. So getting a lot of requests about payment of Strata fees, and I think generally people are starting to understand now that no, Strata fee payment is required. Another issue that we're getting, and it's going to be also addressed on the Ministry of Housing new webpage, is privacy issues. I see people have a certain amount of anxiety around whether people in the building may have COVID-19, and sometimes the Strata manager might become aware that somebody in the building does, and you're faced with a quandary of what should you do with that information. We believe you should be passing it on to your Strata Council, and they may then ask you for input. It's important that you maintain the individual's privacy. So I don't believe, from what we've been told so far, that anybody has an issue with whether or not you should say whether someone in the building has tested positive and whether the Strata Council wants to pass that information on. But they have made it clear that protecting the individual's privacy is, there is no exemption from that. You must not be saying somebody in unit 401 or whatever has tested positive. I think meetings and proxy meetings, I think Tony's already covered. That's going to be covered a little bit as well on the Ministry of Housing site. And one thing specifically that obviously there was an issue before the pandemic and it's become more of an issue is around insurance. I can tell you that we have a number of clients that their renewal date for their insurance was today, and some of them have been getting some pretty nasty surprises, which seem to be getting worse in the last few weeks. so there's a lot of question about how do you pay for these amounts, and one of them is you might have the money available, whether it's in the operating fund or the CRF, but it's not budgeted for. It's significantly beyond the budget. There's been some conflicting, I think, legal advice out there about using Section 98.3 of SPA, which is unapproved expenditures, and your ability to expend from the CRF or the operating account for those. The Ministry of Housing, based on the call this morning, has said that they see no issues around using 98.3 to expend from the operating fund to basically cover your insurance premium. So my understanding is, and from what I've seen on the draft, that's going to be specifically set out on the website that they think that's definitely an allowable use. So that's something to direct your clients to when that comes out. And I think that covers most of the major things that we're getting. The only other thing that we are getting a lot of discussions around, and I don't know if people here are interested in talking about it or not, is specifically how they're running their companies. It's generally speaking, I think, a little easier to get your strata managers working from home and getting them pretty much full access to all the information that they need, and a little more difficult for some of the management companies, depending on the technology you have, getting your accounting and administrative staff to work from home. So there's been a lot of suggestions in our groups about how to handle physical distancing, what people are doing, which people are at home, split shifts, those types of things. The fact that if you can get your property managers, your strata managers working from home, it does free up some extra space in your office to allow potentially the other people that don't have as easy access to resources to be able to work from the office and be physically separated. So that's been a big thing as well. And I think I'll just wrap up by saying that, I think despite the fact that we're kind of living in this alternate universe at the moment, I think a lot of us are personally grateful that, in our industry, our business is reasonably secure in that, we have clients that need us. And so sometimes, it may be a little stressful when the clients are pounding down the door with all the things that they need doing. But I think every time they do that, maybe just remind ourselves that, the reason they're doing that is because they need us. And if nothing else, it's job security, right? So I appreciate this time, and a lot of people don't have that.
Okay, we just got a quick question or a comment made in here from Alan, actually. He's just wanted to confirm that Section 98 expenditures also allow the CRF to be used for insurance.
Yes, operating and CRF, yes.
Yeah. Okay, so really the floor is now open. We've got 19 minutes or so. If anyone wants to ask some questions, raise your hand or feel free to type. The raising hand is the better option for us, actually.
We have a couple questions. Oh. Go ahead, Sandra. Sorry.
It's all right. We have Jason. Jason, you're unmuted. Go ahead, please.
Okay. Thank you. Hi, everyone. So Andrew, to your question, I'll just say really briefly, and then I've got a couple questions of my own. We've set up GoToMyPC on a number of our admin and accounting computers, which allows people at home to work from their home computers and log in to their desktop computer. They still have access to their printer and all the network functions. It's secured using two-factor authentication, which requires your cell phone to confirm that you are who you say you are. So that's something that was suggested to me by one of our tech consultants as a quick and dirty solution, and we rolled it out pretty quickly. It took me a weekend to get about 20 staff members up and running using that. So just thought I'd drop that tip for people who are struggling with how to enable work from home. That's been a really big help for us, in addition to staggering shifts and trying to separate people as much as possible. Kind of leads into my first of two questions. We're sitting here on Zoom and we're all using Zoom, and everybody's talking about Zoom and Zoom stock prices skyrocketing. I'm a little bit concerned about it. More and more people are pointing out some of the privacy issues associated with Zoom, and for now we're just kind of putting our heads down and getting work done because we don't see any other options. And we've instructed our staff not to use the recording function, which is one of the big security concerns. But I would love to see some guidance from the Real Estate Council at some point about whether or not this is permissible, whether or not we're going to get in trouble for moving our clients over to Zoom, which is hosted outside of British Columbia, it's hosted outside of Canada. I just want to make sure that we're not all going to end up slapped on the wrist for that later on.
Okay.
So that's my
Yeah,
comment.
could I just quickly on Zoom, just some specific things that I know are brought to our attention through one of the board members at SPA BC, and we've looked into as well, is that apparently if you're using Zoom on an iOS device, I don't know if it's all mobile or if it's just Apple devices, the information's potentially being sold to Facebook. They're using it for marketing purposes. Now, my understanding is it's only on mobile devices or potentially only iOS, but that Zoom has announced that they're going to stop doing that. Because a lot of governments are using Zoom and they're getting a lot of pushback, obviously, on these types of things. The other thing is a thing called Zoom bombing, which is where people click your link for your Zoom meeting and then interrupt your meeting. My understanding is they're not stealing stuff so much as just basically vandalizing your meeting by, you know, doing things that they shouldn't be doing in the middle of your meeting. That can be, my understanding, somewhat alleviated by not posting your link to your Zoom meeting on a website anywhere. So if you're going to have one and you're sending everybody a personal email with a link, that's okay. A lot of people have been posting the information on various websites, saying, you know, here's the Zoom meeting, here's the link, and then that's been happening. So that's the other thing, at least that I've heard at this point.
Yeah, for sure. That's an issue. That is a problem. It's one of those
Oh,
unintended consequences.
you can also set up a password on a Zoom meeting. It's my understanding. So give people the actual password that they need. So
yeah,
that
it's
a link, they still can't use it.
Everyone should turn on the password by default and get that secure link to their clients and just to their clients. That's good advice. Okay, so the second one, and this is one that I'm growing increasingly concerned about, which is the contractor response to this crisis. I'm hearing more and more contractors expressing concern about servicing in-suite items. We know already that everything from in-suite fire testing to dryer duct cleaning to all that kind of stuff has been deferred, postponed. The government announced yesterday that the shutdown is going to last at least as long as April, but in other jurisdictions, they're talking about June, July, August, maybe, before restrictions start to ease. And I think all of us kind of think, yeah, fire testing gets postponed by a month, no big deal. But if it gets postponed by 4, 5, 6 months, that could, and of course, then there's going to be a huge backlog when it's all done. That's a big concern, but even more concerning for me is the word from some plumbing contractors who are saying that they can't service sanitary lines, that they don't have adequate protection, and nobody does right now. There's no proper PPE for healthcare workers, let alone for plumbers. And I don't have great solutions, but I do want to raise that as a concern. If this is going to drag on for months, that we're going to lose access to contractors. It's going to be harder and harder to get emergency work performed within Strata lots. The HRAI, I can't remember what it stands for, but that's I guess the governing body of mechanical contractors released their guidance a day or two ago, which said that unless contractors can confirm the health status of occupants of a building, which if you read that strictly means everybody within the building, that technicians aren't allowed to service a property. So when I start to see things like that, it gets really concerning for me. And I think as an industry, we need to be thinking about how we can mitigate this concern for our clients, because I'm worried about more and more clients getting locked inside while tradespeople are getting locked out of their homes.
Yeah, it's going to definitely be a concern. I'm just so you know, I'm writing some of these things down where we're not able to provide answers or a specific.
For sure, and I'm raising these because I know there's a lot of people listening right now, not necessarily because I'm expecting answers to them.
Exactly. We just got a comment in here from Alan. He's now heard that there's a ban on any kind of meeting, not just restricted to 10 or less. I was just trying to search Google, and I was thinking maybe CBC. I haven't found anything yet. Certainly, if anything becomes public, then we will obviously share that with you as soon as we can. We've got a comment here from Greg. City of Kelowna Fire Department has written to all property managers to advise that in-suite testing will not be enforced, except with regards to reactive repairs that are identified as necessary, i.e. known malfunctioning devices. So that's certainly an answer from the City of Kelowna. We'll have to wait and see if the other municipalities are going to fall in with that same decision.
Alex, I think that we should also raise the issue of municipal orders. So there are a number of properties around the province that have orders for the installation of backflow valves, other types of drainage issues relating to building safety for elevators, or they could have orders from BC Safety Authority, Technical Safety BC. Like, there are a number of those things that if those orders are there, they're often there for life safety reasons. And I'd recommend that the managers or the councils get in touch with those authorities immediately and see what the status of those orders is, and if there's an extension possibility, or if it really is genuinely a life safety issue that they have no choice, they simply have to do. So, don't just let them go dormant, especially if they're a life safety issue, because if they're a life safety issue or a risk to buildings, they could also jeopardize the insurance coverage for the building if you don't comply with it. So, just pay attention to those.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, and then we've got another question pop in. Okay, it's going back to AGMs. If you hold with us, Robert, I just want to see if there's any other questions popping in other than AGMs. And we've got 10 minutes left.
And Alex, we could ask, would Robert Prince like to just hop on the phone? It might be a little bit quicker that way because he has 2 items, I believe, on there.
That sounds reasonable. Yes, Robert, do you want to raise your hand and we'll unmute your microphone? He doesn't have a microphone.
Okay, no problem.
Okay, all right, that's fair. Okay, so I'll ask each of his questions in turn, and probably Tony is going to be the best person to answer these. So I'm not clear on this point. Is the restricted proxy idea part of an electronic meeting, or does it stand on its own, thereby getting around the requirement for a bylaw?
Correct. It does. The restricted proxy means a meeting is actually constituted. So you actually have a person who's eligible to hold a proxy. So you also need to look at your bylaws regarding this, because you may have to be assigning your proxy to someone to eligibly hold that proxy. So a good example of that is we're going to designate Alex in his townhouse complex to convene the meeting and be the proxy holder. So he is actually physically convening the meeting, calling it to order at a specific time. He's representing all the proxies as well as his own unit, and is basically executing all of the votes as instructed on those proxies, as has been limited or restricted on those proxies. So you actually have a physical meeting happening. The health order that came out this morning that prohibited any more congregating within units, I think it in BC is probably extending today throughout all congregated events. And so it really does prevent 4 or 5 people from showing up at a meeting and wanting to participate. But the other side of that is you can't select who you might or might not permit to show up at a meeting. You really have an obligation to treat everyone fairly and equally. And so if everyone is on a restricted proxy and everyone is exercising their vote, it's the same standard. Again, it's not a perfect solution, but it does at least provide everyone with a substantial amount of evidentiary material at the end to illustrate how the meeting was held, who voted, how they voted, and what the outcomes of those meetings are.
Yeah, and actually I noticed that Robert's second question was actually a duplicate of the first one. I have got a question here that's been forwarded to me by email. And it's from Grant Hastings. He said he saw the proxy form. Did CHOA also provide a sample AGM notice? And I'm pretty sure you did, didn't you?
Yes, but yeah. The sample proxy form, the sample AGM notice, and the sample Excel file for calculating the votes off of all of the restricted proxies is on the website as well.
Excellent. Okay, we've got another question popping in here. I'm going to see if I'll make it bigger, actually. I won't tell you why.
I was going to say, Alex, Before you go to the next question, I know that a good number of the lawyers are available now to do work. Like they're still busy, but you know, if the Strata owners and the Strata Corporation are concerned about whether how the meeting's held or the integrity of the meeting, just get the lawyer for the Strata Corporation to do the meeting. They can be your proxy holder. They can execute the meeting and ensure the minutes and verify the count and the records. So, you know, that's another alternative if your owners are concerned about that.
That's a great idea. Thanks, Tony. Okay, question from Greg. With respect to organizing meetings, if the client insists on an in-person meeting, is the Strata manager still required to follow the instruction to organize that meeting? Is it a lawful instruction considering the orders and guidances? We heard yesterday about a Strata manager in Vancouver who had an in-person meeting shut down by the police. I think because the attendees were not 2 meters apart. From a real estate council point of view, you have to follow a lawful instruction, but you also have to follow the advice and orders required by the provincial health officer. So as far as the real estate council is concerned, if you've raised all of these issues and concerns with your Strata council and told them it's not the best idea, you really shouldn't be doing this, the health officer has said don't do it. If you chose to not, this is going to be one of those ones that could end up in a complaint, and the real estate council would look at this with the lens of, well, what does the health officer say? A prudent licensee may decide to say, you know, I can't organize that meeting. If you want to go ahead and organize that meeting, that's at your choice. If you were to choose to organize that meeting but not attend, I would probably speak to your managing broker first and seek legal advice as well. You obviously would have no obligation as far as attending the meeting. I say no obligation. You have a contract, but again, the real estate council is going to look at that with a lens of what are the issues today. Tony, do you have anything to add on that, or Andrew?
No, I think you've covered it. You know, follow lawful instructions and comply with the law.
Yeah. Okay. Question here from RZ. Hi, Tony. There was chatter amongst our peers about holding a town hall meeting, then 1 week later hold the AGM. Have you seen or heard how this is working?
Yeah, a few Strata corporations have already done this. They gave their notice about 10 days ago, and they've already done town hall meetings some have been by Zoom, some have been by Skype, some have just been general conference call. They're working really well because what they're doing is they're doing it far enough in advance that once the town hall meeting is done, then everybody is filling in their proxies and sending them forward. So what they've essentially had is the discussion of the resolutions. Then they've sent their proxies in, and it's just a matter of the person who's convening the meeting physically representing those votes, running the meeting, and executing those votes as instructed. So it works very well.
Yeah, and that's probably going to be the shortest meeting in the
yeah, that's probably a 15-minute meeting, probably.
Yeah.
Alex, we're just at the 4-minute mark, just so you know. So maybe we'll just finish up on our questions.
Okay, I've just got one more question here. It's from David. We're having a number of scenarios in which special levies are due in coming weeks, and Strata councillors want to know what their obligations are in moving ahead with the work. Can they postpone the work, change the date of when the levy is due? And again, this is a Strata Property Act question, so I don't know if Tony or Andrew want to jump in on this one.
Yeah, well, I can jump in. Andrew can just follow up. If they've got a special levy approved by resolution and they want to make changes or delay it, they might have to have a special general meeting to make amendments to those levies. And I think that's probably the best solution. The other side of it is if the project itself might actually be delayed. So we've seen this on some construction projects right now where they were supposed to be starting May 1st. They've now given notice that they're not starting until July 1st. So the necessity for when the money is due has been delayed. The Strata Corporation still has an obligation to collect those. So maybe what they want to do is give notice to the owners of a special general meeting by proxy recommending a date change. for when the levy is due. And again, remember 3/4 votes to do them. But yeah, you can't undo something, or you can't the other question that comes out of that is, can we refund the money that because we haven't started the project? You can't do that either. If you need to make a significant change, you need to look closely at the resolutions you approved. I'm probably going to suggest that you probably need to have a quick chat with whatever law office you're dealing with too, to make sure that you have the authority to actually execute these, because there may have been sales and conveyances in this process that may result in some other effects. So, you know, there needs to be consideration around those as well. So get some legal advice, get the owners to lawfully undo what they did. That's the basic direction here.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that, thanks, Tony, is if before, obviously you need legal advice, and it depends on the wording of your actual resolution. You're probably going to need a meeting to reverse it. But the other thing to be extremely careful about is what the Strata has done as far as potentially entering into a contract with somebody. So if they're thinking about stopping the work, delaying the work, making some kind of material change, that they might need some advice on what their contractual obligations might be to the contractors. And even if they haven't gotten into a written contract at this point, they still may have some liability with respect to how they've acted and how they've caused a contractor to act, and what may have been done there. The contractor may have started to mobilize, and there may be issues around the bid document and what happens if you don't go ahead with the work. So definitely need legal advice to look on that before you undo what you're, even by a meeting, and then find out that you're actually in some type of contract and potentially open to damages.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, both of you. And thank you everybody for all of your questions and for sharing your insights with each other. I really appreciate all of your times. This is truly an unprecedented health and economic crisis we're facing together. I know the Real Estate Council, CHOA and SPA-BC are working very hard to keep you informed. And please do continue to visit the COVID-19 website for resources and information. And as always, please contact us if you do have any questions. I will wrap up this webinar now, but before you go, I'm getting emails. It looks like we're probably going to be hosting a residential rental property management or a rental property management webinar probably sometime next week. So do watch out for your emails for your invites to that as well. So if anyone has any further questions, feel free to email them to advisor@recbc.ca. The three advisors here, we're still working from home. We have our headsets on, so we're still accepting phone calls as well. And of course, do take a look at our website for any of the other departments that you need access to, education, licensing. I'm just going to put a splash screen up on here now, if I can get back to sharing my screen so that everybody can I see it? I was hoping to put up there it is. I'm just going to pop that up now, just as we finish. A reminder that this webinar is recorded, so if you don't have a chance to write these down now, don't worry. It will be available to a later date. So thank you again, everybody. I appreciate your time. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Tony.
Thanks, Alex. Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks.